Who Killed WCW? The documentary on Vice TV, uh, executive produced by Dwayne Johnson, The Rock. Um, Couple other guys, the guys who's behind the Dark Side of the Ring. They're doing this documentary as so you know it's going to be legit. So the first episode was great. Short episodes, basically the beginnings of WCW and how it got to where it was and how it overtook um WWF at the time. Now they gave you Eric Bischoff's whole origin story. Now people who are familiar with it, who follow this company from the beginning, like I did, grew up watching it like I did, knows the origin story of Eric Bischoff. Eric Bischoff was never really a wrestling guy. He was always a salesman. I mean, that's literally what his occupation was before he joined professional wrestling. He was a salesman. So, like a salesman would naturally be in a profession of any sort, given any kind of opportunity, he pretty much bullshitted his way to the top. And then now when he's at the top and he's got a billionaire war chest behind him, he was allowed to make crazy brash decisions. That's it. You know what I'm saying? Now credit to him for having the gumption to do a lot of what he did. You got to credit Eric Bischoff in the sense of how he was able to build up WCW. He did change things a lot on the production side. He made it look a lot better. He made it look like a television show. Where before he showed up, it wasn't that at all. Because listen, I was watching WCW from the beginning, all the way back to the Saturday morning days. And when Eric Bischoff came in, he changed up a lot on the presentation side, and he polished it, and it made it look more presentable to the casual fan who don't knows nothing about WCW. So they showed the first episode being in the Mall of America. I remember all of that. I'm talking about Monday Nitro. I'm fast forwarding. They showed that episode of it being in a Mall of America. And it just brought up those flashbacks of when I was where I was at the time, when Lex Luger showed up at that Mall of America, because we seen Lex on WWF programming not too long ago. So it was just the reality of things was just starting to cross on the business side, on the storytelling side. All of that happened with WCW. You were seeing things that you never seen before. They were showing the idea they had where the outsiders came in when they were on the beach and they were shooting by the pool. I guess they were in Orlando or something, or somewhere, probably Florida somewhere, Tampa or whatever. And that was when the outsiders came in and did their evasion and beat up everybody in the back with baseball bats and the whole 9 yards. Man, I remember that moment like it was. I remember that. I remember going to school in middle school because I was in middle school at the time, and we were geeked out of our minds because we have never seen anything like that on national TV before, especially in pro wrestling. If you grew up watching WWF and WCW in the early days, you didn't see any of this stuff. This was the shock value that later, went on to be adapted by Vince McMahon and, the Attitude Era. He took some of that. I mean, let's just keep it real. And you started toward the end of the episode, after they started showing a lot of the beginning parts of how it began, a lot of the parts of, how the turn began as far as getting Hulk Hogan, getting a lot of big signees. I thought it was cool to see that Hulk Hogan just didn't really kind of decided at the last minute that he wanted to be the third guy for the outsiders. But what was so crazy to me too, thinking about that moment, is that Eric, being the salesman that he is, being the risk taker that he is, he put way too much faith in Hulk Hogan. He put way too much faith in him to the point where he didn't even know that Hulk was going to do the turn or not because he hadn't spoke to him the day of, the match. It's nuts. Like he just put too much faith into him, which ultimately burned him in the end when Starrcade came around and Sting faced Hogan in that matchup. He put faith in Hogan again as far as the finish was concerned. But the truth of the matter is, Eric, Eric really put himself in a situation where he gave too much power to Hulk Hogan from the beginning. He signed Hawk, and credit to Hawk being a shrewd, savvy businessman. Just like Kevin Nash said in the interview, he said, "That doesn't work for me, brother." That's what Hawk did a lot of. Talk about politicking. He was politicking to the third power as far as getting what he wants, when he wants, and whenever he wants. And, he was empowered from day one as far as getting complete creative control. He had that coming into WCW. It was something that Eric had to do. He felt that he had to do it to acquire his services, and it worked. It worked for a while until it didn't work anymore. You let the monster completely gobble up everything. So it showed how things started to, slowly come apart after Starcade with the shitty finish. Because I remember that finish as well. People were like, "Oh my god, and they didn't get the pin right." Sting went over, the right guy went over, but we didn't get to see it the way we thought we would see it. It was a perfect buildup. They did everything right. It was an 18-month buildup until Sting finally faced Hogan at the end of the year for Starcade. They broke pay-per-view records. They did everything right. But it was the finish. The finish was the slow demise of the company. And it all came back to Eric Bischoff giving Hulk Hogan way too much power, because Hulk, at the end of the day, was going to come back to what he knew best. And that was, "This doesn't work for me, brother." So I think Hulk was trying to put himself over in that match, and it got turned, it flipped back to Sting getting it somehow. It was just a mess, a complete and utter mess. And, Bischoff, he said it, he admitted, he said to this day, he gets shit for it. And rightfully so, dude. You can't keep cucking around for Hulkster. I had to pull up this meme, because they said Bret Hart gave a comment, my favorite wrestler. You go, obviously. Bret Hart gave a comment, and he said, Hawk was basically the puppet master to Eric Bischoff. And Eric Bischoff, he was just a prop. That's what killed WCW. Very simple. Simple quote right there. That is the essence of what killed it, I think. Now, this was episode 1. They'll get into the later stages, the goofier stuff when Vince Russo comes along and all of that. Again, I know the story already. I watched it because you want to watch it to see the reactions of, newer people brought to the conversation that didn't comment before, like The Rock and others. So that's what I'm really watching it for. As for the story, I already know what happened to it, but Bret Hart's quote summed it up perfectly. That's exactly what happened. So to just see it and have the younger generation see it is pretty cool, because then they can come to their conclusions as to what happened. So yeah, that's just my thoughts, my reactions for the first episode of what killed WCW. Yeah, so tune in for the next episode.